In a quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood, nestled among ordinary homes and tree-lined streets, stood a duplex that bore silent witness to something unimaginable. A family, seeking only peace after a natural disaster, moved in with hope in their hearts, and unknowingly stepped into a nightmare. This is the true haunting that inspired The Conjuring: Last Rites. The Smurls were your typical working-class Catholic family. Jack and Janet, devoted parents, moved into a modest duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania in 1973, after their previous home was devastated by a catastrophic flood. Alongside their young daughters and Jack's elderly parents, they hoped this new house would be their sanctuary. The house was far from perfect. It was worn and needed serious renovations. The walls were cracked, paint peeled from surfaces, and there was an overall sense of neglect. As the family set to work repairing walls and repainting rooms, the very act of renovation seemed to awaken something dark within the house. Tools vanished mysteriously, only to reappear later in the same places, and odd noises echoed from behind newly painted walls. They hadn't just moved into a normal house, they had awakened something evil and malevolent. What began as small disturbances escalated into deeply personal torment. Janet was often alone in the basement doing laundry when she began hearing voices, her name called softly from the shadows, in her mother-in-law's voice beckoning her for help. But when she tried to confront her mother-in-law, she claimed Janet and Jack had a terrible fight, with Jack using shockingly foul language, something she had never heard from her devout son. But Janet denied it ever happened as Jack was not at home. Was the entity mimicking voices, sowing discord within the family? Janet's experiences darkened. She saw shadow figures dart across walls, heard footsteps above her when she was alone, and began to sense an oppressive force wherever she went. At night, she felt cold hands on her body. Jack refused to believe her, until it happened to him. One night, Janet heard whispers coming from her pillow. She turned to Jack, urging him to listen. When he heard them too, voices clear and deliberate, his skepticism turned to fear. The presence made itself known. The couple began experiencing synchronized touches by an invisible force. Jack's resistance gave way to dread. The haunting was no longer just Janet's fear, it was now his nightmare too. Unable to withstand the escalating disturbances, the Smurls turned to the Catholic Church. A local priest visited and performed blessings and minor rites, but nothing changed. The dark force lingered, growing bolder. Janet, seeking answers, attended a lecture by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Moved by her desperation, they agreed to help. Just before their visit, the entity launched a violent attack. Jack was pinned to the floor by invisible hands, unable to breathe or move. When the Warrens entered the house, they immediately sensed powerful energies. Lorraine claimed to have seen black masses floating and demonic figures hiding in the corners of rooms. Through their investigations, they identified 4 distinct presences: a harmless elderly woman, one angry young girl, a man who had died a horrible death in that house, and a powerful demonic force controlling the 3 spirits. Attempts to cleanse the house with prayers and rituals seemed to provoke the spirits. Paranormal activity intensified. Growls echoed through the walls, crosses inverted themselves, and a foul, clinging smell filled the house once more. The Smurls were now in the grip of something ancient, angry, and territorial, and it wasn't letting go. A formal exorcism was conducted with the church's approval, praying fervently for release, but instead of peace, it brought retaliation. Objects levitated and smashed against walls. Janet was thrown from her bed into the wall. Loud, guttural voices filled the house at night. There was always a very foul smell spread in the house that never stopped. What had once been frightening had now become life-threatening. The entity, it seemed, had drawn strength from the rituals meant to cast it out. Jack and Janet's physical health began to deteriorate. They couldn't sleep. Their daughters began having nightmares and saw things they could never describe. Even their dog whimpered at empty corners of the room. The Smurls tried to go on a camping trip for a few days, but they saw dark shadows even during their trip. While they were away on their trip, the neighbors saw some lights in the house and very loud screams coming out of the house as if someone was torturing them. The neighbors called the police, but they found nothing in the house. The Smurls were emotionally exhausted and spiritually battered. Their home had become a prison, and their faith was the only barrier between survival and surrender.
Desperate for help, the Smurls went public. Jack reached out to the press, hoping media attention would force the church to act more decisively. Instead, it unleashed a storm. News vans parked outside their home. Reporters called day and night. Neighbors began gossiping. Some believed their story, while others accused them of seeking fame. To assess the claims, the bishop sent a priest to investigate the family. For 2 days, nothing happened. The silence cast doubts. The Smurls' lives were now under constant public scrutiny. They had no privacy, and worse, no escape.
After over 13 years of torment, the Smurls moved to a new home in 1988. The family never experienced disturbances in their new home, but the psychological scars remained. The case was later documented in books like The Haunted and dramatized in films. While skeptics argue over the legitimacy of the events, the Smurls have consistently maintained their story.